Hey, welcome back to Recently Played. I got my holiday-themed tea set out here, so you know what that means. It's time to talk about my favorite music of the year. So this time I'm going to be giving you my top 10 albums of 2022. I know last year I did 100 albums. That was way too many. I'm not going to do that again. But you know, you can always go to my Instagram, Recently Played with Sean, and check out my monthly album recommendations. I've been recommending albums once a month throughout the whole year. So feel free to go check that out anytime. You know, if I do a top 100 list, it's going to be mostly those albums anyways. So, you know, go check them out. But, you know, for the purpose of this video, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit more in depth about 10 albums that I really liked this year. So who knows, it might be just as long as the top 100 video. Let's see what happens. Alrighty, here we go. My number 10 album of 2022 is Emotional Creatures by Beach Bunny. So, on first impression, this is a solid, clean, well-produced alternative rock album. The hooks are bright and catchy, and the lyrics and vocals are front and center. This album is so accessible because of just how straightforward and to the point it is. You know, especially in today's indie rock scene where everybody is trying to bend genres and reinvent themselves, it's really nice to hear such a simple but well-executed release. But that's not why this album is on the list. It's here because of how much heart and soul is put into it. Vocalist Lily Trefillo comes across as this underdog protagonist, and when listening to their music, I found myself really rooting for her. And I guess this was the original appeal with Beach Bunny with their breakout single Prom Queen. But on Emotional Creatures, I think the vocals especially have been so well developed, and I think that's primarily why I think this is their best work to date. So as the name might suggest, this is quite an emotional album, and I really do like how Lily just throws her emotions out there without any shame or restraint. It's quite nice. It's like, this is how I feel, deal with it. And there's a kind of nice, in-your-face punk rock attitude to that. Fantastic lyrics and writing throughout the album, really great sense of imagery and just creating lines that the audience is gonna connect with. At the end of the album opener, Entropy, she sings, "Running away through the rain makes your socks wet." It's really a line that just brings an immediate image to your head. Another line on this album with great imagery. On Weeds, she sings, "You can't blossom if you keep growing gardens out of weeds." Again, just brings an immediate image to your head and still gets across the emotion of the track. And you know, the fact that there's nothing too fancy or experimental production-wise, I think only adds to the appeal of the album. In this context, Beach Bunny are our humble heroes, not impressing us with their skill or technicality or innovation, but just playing some power chords and shouting out their feelings in a way that relates to our emotions and insecurities. So yeah, very accessible, relatable album from Beach Bunny. Very solid sounding rock album, quite easy to get into and enjoy. I recommend it. Number 10 album of the year, Emotional Creatures by Beach Bunny. Alrighty, moving on. At number 9, we got Laughing So Hard It Hurts by MAVI. MAVI opens up this album by saying the line, "Praying they still make love in my sighs." And in one line, he perfectly outlines the vulnerability and poetic wordplay that can be found consistently throughout this album. This is such an honest and soulful album, and he writes these lines that really stick with you for days. I think people in general underestimate the power of hip-hop for storytelling, self-reflection, and self-expression, but I think in many ways it's better suited for those things than pretty much any other popular genre of music. And this album in particular, Laughing So Hard It Hurts by MAVI, I think exemplifies all of those things very well. I think MAVI is very relatable on this album because he has this very humble attitude, and at the same time, he's a lot of fun to listen to. On top of all of the great, deeply meaningful lyricism is some fantastic flow and phrasing. Some of the rhythms and patterns that he gets into could very well work on songs that are a lot more heavy and lively, but I really like his decision to restrain from that and keep it more raw and subtle. Overall, the production does a great job of supporting the theme and vibe of the album. I would even say that the beats sound just as deep thinking and introspective as the words do. Instrumentally, these songs really do make you feel like you're spiraling deeper and deeper into your own thoughts. The track, My Good Ghosts, is a clear album highlight for me. Such a beautiful and soulful track. I think it does a great job of expressing these feelings of heartbreak and remorse. And the vocal performance MAVI gives is nothing short of breathtaking. You can hear the emotion in his voice, and it's moving. And honestly, just reading the lyrics by themselves, apart from the music, makes for some really enjoyable poetry. It's kind of hard to explain exactly why it's so enjoyable or emotionally impactful, but it's just really nice word choice. MAVI, as a rapper, being able to put out writing like this that is so stylized and poetic and interesting, but still keep the music fun and enjoyable, that to me makes him stand out. I think he is definitely an exciting, unique, up-and-coming artist worth paying attention to. And you know, I enjoyed his previous album, Let the Sun Talk. Personally, I like Laughing So Hard It Hurts better, but these are two very strong albums and very impressive for a new artist like MAVI. Definitely check them both out if you haven't. Alrighty, at number 8, we got Forever One by Girls' Generation. Girls' Generation is the group synonymous with the term girl group. Back when I didn't have the slightest interest in this genre of music, I still somehow knew Girls' Generation. I think they played a pretty big role in making K-pop what it is today. They were the first to pull off a lot of ideas and concepts that would be later developed by groups in years to come. And so, in a year where hearing this search for new sounds and possibilities ironically felt a little stale and uninteresting, it was so nice to just get a solid, full-length release from none other than Girls' Generation. Much of this album embraces the positive, feel-good, cheerful energy of K-pop and does so with taste and originality. And then to top it off, there's still this level of experimentation in there that feels fresh and exciting and gently hints at some new possibilities for the group. In general, great vocal performances, melodies, and line distribution all over the album. In particular, I did really enjoy hearing Taeyeon so prominently after her recent solo activities. First two tracks, Forever One and Lucky Like That, just radiate that feel-good positive energy and flow so well into one another. Love the vocals in the chorus of Forever One, very cool group melody. And then the intro to Lucky Like That is so perfectly timed, and then you got that guitar solo later on in the track, and it's got the strings in the background, and it's just so perfect. It is almost overwhelmingly joyous. It is totally transcendent. And then we get a great 3-track run with 17, Villain, and You Better Run, and that kind of returns it to more of a girl crush sound. In particular, You Better Run is such a cool track. A crazy melody for a pop song of any kind. Really cool, experimental, yet tight production. Definitely feels badass and well executed. And then right after that, Closer is a great disco pop bop. And you know, a track like this is nothing new, especially not right now, but the execution is great and its placement on the album works so well. And Mood Lamp Straight Through to Paper Planes is such a smooth run of tracks with, again, very cool production and ideas on their own. I definitely enjoyed the almost psychedelic spaciness on Mood Lamp. And with Paper Plane, I feel like the album kind of returns to that thankful, feel-good energy that it started with, and in that respect, it kind of comes full circle. So overall, I love how there's this really great classic vibe to this album. It reminds you of classic K-pop without sounding like it's trying to sound like that. The retro throwback concept was done very gently and tastefully, and just the quality of production and mixes makes it feel so fresh. Forever One by Girls' Generation. I did not expect myself to like this album so much, but you know what? It's fantastic. Go check it out. Alrighty, keeping this moving. At number 7, we got The Last Thing Left by Seisumi. As a band, Seisumi has been through a lot. In 2019, they lost a founding member and close friend, their original drummer, Seimin Kang. And this album doesn't so much reflect on the loss and grief itself as it does on everything that comes afterwards. All the regular, boring days that are now a little dimmer after going through a traumatic experience. And, I think this is something that everyone can relate to some extent. Even the most cheerful songs on this album are blanketed with a subtle sadness. On the track Around You, vocalist Sumi sings about wanting to be with someone that makes you feel like a new person, which on the surface is a pretty cute love song. But there's a deeper layer to the song that explores the monotony of everyday life, of not feeling the urge to do anything at all, of being stuck in your head and lost in your own thoughts. This isn't so much a song about longing for love as it is a song about longing for an entirely different life because your current one has just become too hard to bear. This idea of the dream is brought up consistently throughout this album. On the second track of the album, Still Here, she sings, "You say everything is okay, yeah, it's a good dream." That pretending that everything is okay, that you're okay, is just a dream. Because in reality, you're not okay. And what happened, that wasn't okay either. Seisumi explores the absurdity of how, after traumatic experiences, people can just go back to their everyday lives as if nothing even happened. And that's why I think my favorite moment of this whole album is on Picture of You, where they finally just let it all out and Sumi sings, "I don't want to get used to this feeling. I know all the days are not for getting ready to say goodbye. I just cry, still smile, walking, but it's too quiet for me to stand it." And I think there's something so beautiful about that stubborn rejection of reality. People say that you get used to that feeling of grief, but what if you don't want to get used to it? Because deep down, again, you're just not okay with it. On the second last track of the album, she sings, "I've been in the dream for too long, now I know how much it hurt me. Now I say sorry to you and to myself." What they're saying is that it wasn't fair to the person that you lost to not be living your life to the fullest. And most importantly, it wasn't fair to yourself. So, like all things in life, all you can really do is apologize and move forward. And I think the fact that it's hard for me to not really talk about the lyrics and themes of this album without feeling emotional myself just shows how impactful it is, because it really does capture those feelings so beautifully. And I didn't even talk about the sound and production of this album, but it's wonderful. In particular, fantastic guitar tones. If you're into shoegaze, surf rock, or more chill indie rock and you want to hear an album with a great amount of depth and soul, I'd strongly recommend The Last Thing Left by Seisumi. Really beautiful album. Like, I'm gonna be remembering this one for years. It's just such a memorable, beautiful album. Alrighty, at number 6 we have Beatopia by beabadoobee. Is it Beatopia? I saw her live recently and she said Beatopia, but I don't know, maybe that's just because she's British. I'm gonna say Beatopia, feels right to me. So I thought that beabadoobee's 2020 album Fake It Flowers was quite good. Might I even say that I thought it was a little underrated. I thought it was a solid 90s-esque alternative rock album. But undoubtedly, Beatopia has been the album to propel her to popularity. I don't know, I'm not on TikTok, I don't know if that had something to do with it as well. But I think it's mostly because this album is really good. This is a beautiful, balanced album with some fantastic production, perfectly suited vocal performances, and front to back it plays so effortlessly. Awesome, catchy, memorable pop-punk tracks like 1036, Talk, Don't Get the Deal. But then there's tracks like See You Soon, Ripples, Broken CD, Love Song. The majority of this album is made up of these quieter, more intimate tracks that are so sweetly sung and gentle. I think out of anything, songs like these are what beabadoobee does best, and I think that having this side of her be the front and center focus of the album was a wise decision. I think that her 2021 track, Last Day on Earth, was very good, and I thought that the whole Britpop throwback was very cool, and aesthetically it did kind of fit in really well with that whole hyperpop and drum and bass style that's become very popular lately. So it was nice to hear tracks with some of that influence, like Fairy Song and Tinkerbell is Overrated. But for me, Pictures of Us is really the highlight of this album. My first time playing through the album in full, I was enjoying it up until then, having a good time, but when I heard that track, I'm just like, okay, there's something here. And I think that's what made me want to devote more time to listening to this album. My biggest criticism of the album would be the lyrics, which on their own aren't necessarily that interesting. They are quite vague and sometimes a little generic. We go together like the gum on a shoe is an obvious example. And I think in the promotion for this album, in the artwork, in the name, which refers to an imaginary world that she made up when she was a kid, I think all of this hinted to it being a very personal album that deeply explores her childhood, maybe even a concept album about that imaginary world and what it means to her. And lyrically, I didn't get much of that at all. There is some of it at times, but it's just really way too vague to take much away from it. But the good news is what this album could have been doesn't take away at all from what it is. Even though the lyrics are vague and might not always have a lot of direct storytelling or meaning to them, the vagueness of them allows the listener to attach their own meaning to it. And in that sense, I think the lyrics totally work for the style and they're memorable and enjoyable. On the last track, when they sing, "When the lights go down, don't say I didn't warn ya. I don't think that's legal in the state of California." I don't think anyone knows what that means, but it's such a fun and catchy track and you want to listen to it over and over again. Beatopia is a very balanced album that plays to all of beabadoobee's strengths as a singer, as a songwriter, as a producer, and by the way, great work from co-producer, co-songwriter, and band member Jacob Bugden. I think I'll leave this one off by just saying Beatopia is beabadoobee's finest work to date. Alrighty, at number 5, we got Cherry by Daphni. Dan Snaith of Caribou and his solo DJ alias Daphni is just one of my favorite personalities in the music industry. I think so far he has had such an interesting and eclectic career. I've seen Caribou live multiple times, and I've also had the pleasure of seeing Dan Snaith himself DJ. And I can vouch that he is an excellent DJ with a great understanding of dance music. And if you're not familiar with his work as a DJ, I'd highly recommend watching a video on YouTube of him spinning. Because, I just really admire his love of music of all kinds, and his passion for digging and finding new music really shows in all of his work. And while I said that I generally do enjoy his DJ sets, I don't really feel like he's put out an album under his Daphni moniker that really does that side of him justice. And this is what makes Cherry such a victory. It's been a long time coming, but this is definitely the badass techno dance album that Dan Snaith has always had in him. It feels fresh, it feels exciting, it's gritty, and it's got those obscure samples that you would expect from someone like him. And also, I think this album has that sense of space and openness that I really like about Dan Snaith's more minimal electronic music which he's put out in the past. And like I said, this album's badass. It's bumping from front to back, and even when it's not bumping, it's bumping. To elaborate on that last point, there are some wonderful, more ambient tracks that break up the album nicely, but are also just so engaging on their own. The track Crimson is so bare and simple, yet builds so much tension by the end of the track and feels so epic. And I love these tracks that are just dedicated to playful experimentation. In general, I think electronic music lends itself really well to this never-ending quest for new possibilities. And I like the songs on this album that are just a random, simple idea. The track Falling is just a sample being run through some filters, but it's genuinely a cool effect. And you know, the same goes for the even more minimal track, Arp Blocks, which kind of just sounds like him messing with some modular synths, but it's actually pretty cool. And to take that a step further, I think it supports the theme of idea to creation on this album. What I mean by that is this album doesn't sound like it was labored over for a long period of time. These mixes sound pretty raw and bare, and that certainly has its own appeal. Cherry is about finding some sort of new sound and texture and molding it into something fun and exciting. Title track Cherry, that very wet, metallic sounding synth texture is just so delicious to listen to. Again, I love how these songs are just centered and built around a simple idea. You know, there's that North African or Middle Eastern sounding sample on Always There, and then there's that bouncing bass line underneath the piano sample in Cloudy. I think it is this sense of creativity and playfulness that makes this album so much fun. And as I said before, this album is bumping. It makes you want to move your body, or at least internally moving your body in your head. But yeah, Cherry by Daphni, fantastic electronic album. Alrighty, moving on. It totally isn't One Day Later. I didn't just put on the same clothes and pick up where I left off. I don't do that. At number 4, we got MOTOMAMI by RosalÍa. So similar to a lot of my favorite pop stars and vocalists, there are many sides to RosalÍa. You know, she is a flamenco music prodigy who is preserving and revitalizing her traditional Spanish culture and its ancient roots. And then she's kind of taken this a step further and found new sounds and possibilities in the niche world of indie experimental music. And then to top it all off, she is a Latin music superstar collaborating with some of the most famous artists in the world right now. And so, you know, after an artist like RosalÍa has been through all of these hoops, has had all of these experiences, what kind of solo album do they make? You know, how does an artist like this accurately represent themselves? Well, you get MOTOMAMI, which is probably the most interesting and eclectic big name album release of the year. I think if you've never listened to RosalÍa before and you want to get an idea of what kind of artist she is, MOTOMAMI is a solid choice. It does a great job of defining someone who is rather undefinable. You know, I think one of the biggest things to like about this album is what a sonic adventure it is. And through all of the crazy production and songwriting are some truly phenomenal vocal performances. In every style she tackles on MOTOMAMI, RosalÍa is killing it on the vocals. You know, it's what ties the album together. It's what makes it an enjoyable, consistent listen from front to back. I love how the vocals are mixed to sound like they are just so front and center. Like, RosalÍa sounds like she's in such close proximity to you. It's really nice. Her badass attitude on reggaeton-influenced tracks like Daoko or Chicken Teriyaki are just so in your face and confident. And then she just delivers these show-stopping ballads like G3, N15, and Hentai, which are so powerful. And to talk about the latter track there, you know, it's a genuinely beautiful song about wanting your life to be as visceral and luscious as anime porn, which is just one of the many ideas on this album that is strange but totally works. I love the playful experimentation on this album. On Bulerias, she plays with auto-tune and filters on top of flamenco rhythms in a way that's kind of become her signature at this point. And then, we get Bizcochito, which is just spastic and crazy, as is Cute, with its heavy bass rhythms combined with, just sounds like some wildly edited castanets. And on songs like these, I love how she just goes for it and doesn't hold back on these ideas that are so audacious. There's many different facets of Latin music that RosalÍa has explored in her pretty early career so far. And, I think it's cool on this album to see her kind of reinvent them for herself and find new meaning for them in this album. Like, I wouldn't call this a reggaeton album at all, but it certainly has quite a strong reggaeton influence. And what she does with that influence is quite fresh and exciting, and in my opinion, done from a place of respect, admiration, and love for the music. And come on, MOTOMAMI is just a fantastic name for an album. I don't think that's ever getting old. Alrighty, we're getting there. Top 3. At number 3, we got Daoko, live Unplugged in Sogetsu Hall by Daoko. A live Unplugged album of all previously released material doesn't really seem like anything to write home about, let alone include in a top 10 albums of the year list, but the amount of work that she put into this performance is just, it's very commendable. This is a beautiful, breathtaking live performance. Many of these new arrangements of songs from her back catalog feel entirely new. In particular, the first 2 tracks of the album just sound so captivating and dramatic. They sound like they were composed by Ryuichi Sakamoto. And I love how raw the vocals are. It sounds like you're sitting in the room and listening to the untreated vocals straight out of the mixer. It's quite nice. And to add to that, the vocals are so much fun to listen to. It really sounds like she just lets go and gives such an expressive, dramatic performance without really worrying about trying to sound a certain way or be technically accurate. And this is quite a minimal performance instrumentally, and I love how she takes advantage of all of that open space to just play around with the subtlety of her vocal performance. And with just guitar, keys, and cello, they do a wonderful job of keeping this performance engaging from front to back. Wonderful playing overall. It's kind of nice to listen to something that is still so dynamic and lively without any drums or percussion. It has a really unique effect. And again, I've been a fan of Daoko for a while. I'm quite familiar with her earlier albums, but some of these songs I didn't recognize at all, and I thought that was so cool. And there's just so many fun little ideas, like they'll create this big open dramatic moment, or they'll go into this really heavy jazzy jam. Every song on this album I feel has something really interesting and unique about it. But yeah, for me, this one is definitely up there with all of my favorite live acoustic albums. Neil Young live at Massey Hall, MTV Unplugged albums, Nirvana and Jay-Z. This one is definitely up there with those. But yeah, even if you're not familiar with Daoko at all, I would still say that this album is not to be missed. It is so emotionally captivating, cool, and unique. Alrighty, at number 2, we got Ants From Up There by Black Country New Road. This album is simple yet elegant in its presentation and deeply connected to some very real feelings. The anger, the sadness, the frustration, the catharsis of it all is what makes this a great album. I've said this a few times before, listening to this album right when it came out, right after reading the statement from Isaac Wood about leaving the band, it just felt like we were hearing these lightning in a bottle captured emotions. Isaac Wood's vocal performances are so captivating, moving, and full of emotion. Honestly, I think it's the vulnerability of these vocals That's a big part of why I really like this album. And also why I think it's a step up from their debut. Fantastic sense of dynamics throughout this one. The lows are so low and delicate. It displays a nice sense of maturity from the band. Track Goodwill Hunting feels like an instant classic. She had Billie Eilish style is such a memorable, iconic line that will continue to be jokingly referenced online for years to come. Oof, and that moment when they punch in with the chorus at the everyone will say it was cool. Oh, so good. These cryptic, absurd lyrics can be interpreted in many different ways, and I think they do a great job of expressing these emotions that are kind of hard to understand. The arrangements are fantastic from front to back throughout the album. I think, in particular, Haldern and Breadsong do a particularly good job of including the whole band in a way that is really tasteful and well thought out. And I think it's worth noting that a lot of these string and horn parts are played by members of the band. These aren't hired studio musicians. In many instances, it feels like they really take the spotlight and they're the center of attention. And I think that's really the difference between them just being some added production effect or some extra arrangement on top of the core band. These really feel like they're being played by core members of the band. I called this album elegant before, and I think these arrangements really do play a big part in that. Oof, and when the drums are going wild at the end of Snow Globes, and it's on top of these beautiful melodies, and you could just feel that outpouring of emotion. I mentioned that I really love the kind of cathartic feeling of this album, and in that moment in particular at the end of Snow Globes, it's just screaming that, it's not fair. It's not fair to feel the way that you do, to be kind of subject to these feelings that you really can't control. But yeah, beautiful, striking, memorable album from a great band that audibly has amazing chemistry with one another. Time will tell if this becomes an indie rock classic, but at least for this year, it really felt like one. And here we are, my number one album of 2022. It's no surprise, it's Bad Mode by Hikaru Utada. This one, it really felt like number one for me in terms of the enjoyment that I've had from an album and just, the amount of emotional connection I've had with an album and just the sheer execution and presentation. Everything is just happening on Bad Mode. So as I said, this year I really took a deep dive into the rabbit hole that is Utada's discography, and starting with their 2016 album Fantôme, Utada began to take a much more mature direction with their music, using more arrangements with real instruments and kind of moving away from that signature techno-pop sound. And I think this style carried over quite well into their 2018 album Hatsukoi. And while I do like both of these albums, I think that there's a bit of a dullness or a lack of energy to them, and maybe that comes from the more mature stylistic direction. And this is primarily why I think that Bad Mode is such a victory for Utada, because they managed to keep the mature sound of those last two albums, but still deliver the energy that makes Utada's earlier albums so much fun. I don't hesitate to say that this is some of Utada's best work to date, and it is a self-reinventing album and a well-earned achievement. The collaborations with Floating Points, A.G. Cook, Nariaki Obukuro, and Skrillex are just great ideas in themselves and really do contribute to giving the album that refreshing sense of energy. Title track Bad Mode just does a brilliant job of outlining the themes of the album. It's desire versus responsibility, pleasure versus passion, fantasy versus reality. Bad Mode is all about these opposing forces. It's an album about a battle that we all face with ourselves. And I think that there's a real earnest and genuine vulnerability to this album. And, I really loved how somebody like Utada, who's been in the music industry for over 20 years and has reached so much acclaim and prestige, can open up about their insecurities and sound so relatable. On the track Find Love, Utada sings about not trying to find the perfect partner, but rather trying to work on yourself so that you can become someone who can be loved. You know, it's really a song about stepping back and looking at yourself in the mirror before accepting the responsibility of a committed relationship. When Utada sings, I know it's somewhere in me, I'm just trying to find love, I find that line so convincing and relatable because it's about knowing that the change that you want to see in yourself, it's already there, but it's going to take a lot of consistent hard work to bring it out. And the depictions of indulgence, fantasy, and desire are so well executed. In particular, Dare ni mo iwanai, this beautiful, emotional fantasy about wanting to be physical with your ex-partner again. And of course, the epic 12-minute album closer, Somewhere Near Marseille, produced by Floating Points, shows this desire and indulgence as this never-ending spiral. It's something that you only sink deeper and deeper into until eventually it's time to wake up. And yeah, Bad Mode, Hikaru Utada. That's my #1 pick for 2022. Before I leave you for today, I want to give a quick shout out to some albums that could have been on this list, maybe on a different day of the week. Air Guitar by Sobs, Un Verano Sin Ti by Bad Bunny, Pigments, Don Richard and Spencer Zahn, Love for Rent by Smino, Sometimes Forever by Soccer Mommy, Big Time by Angel Olsen, Tickets by Anna Takeuchi, and Horn by A-Pink. I really enjoyed those albums as well. You know, I did kind of fight for each of them to try to get on the list, but it didn't quite happen. But yeah, it's been a great 2022 of music. I hope to keep listening, enjoying, and sharing my thoughts, feelings, and opinions on music in 2023. Until then, take it easy. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.